As part of that, I'll touch on some material that the pros, the producer responsibility organizations, put together, called the landfill transfer station design requirement documents. I'll talk a little bit about the on-site assessment tool, which is a really important assessment tool that was developed again by the pros. Then I'll go through very briefly what Safety First is all about, and then I'll talk about Backhaul. Lots and lots of folks on this and organizations listed on this page. I am not going to go through everything. I think the first sentence is the most important thing, is Backhaul is a collaboration. If we didn't collaborate, it would not work. And so I just want to acknowledge that there's a really important component to Backhaul that makes it successful, and that is collaboration. Also want to acknowledge that some of the images that you'll see in this presentation came from folks who live and work in the communities, and they've kindly provided some of their photos for me to use. The beginnings of Backhaul, how we got here, started out with Indigenous Services Canada and the First Nations Solid Waste Management Initiative. This got rolling back in 2016, I believe, and it was put in place to support waste reduction and diversion, support sustainable solutions, and to support partnerships. Just some of the projects that were going on at First Nation communities all across the province that are supported through the through Indigenous Services Canada, shown on this map. I also want to acknowledge that Backhaul itself would not exist without the province of Manitoba, now the Department of Environment and Climate Change, and the producer responsibility program approval letters, where the minister has included in those program approval letters an expectation that the pros will work collaboratively to maximize synergies and deliver program outcomes in cost-effective and efficient manners. And the part that's not in this quote is the expectation is that no matter where you live in Manitoba, you should expect to have access to recycling. And that was kind of one of the key genesises of how Backhaul got started. The beginning of Backhaul started at the Manitoba Association of Regional Recyclers. It's a 2018 forum. It's a place, for those of you that don't know, where those of us who are involved in the industry get together a couple of times a year, specifically the annual forum in the fall. And there's all kinds of opportunities for networking, information sharing, and celebrating success. And it was at the 2018 forum that a number of the producer responsibility organizations approached me and said, hey, we need to do some work on First Nation remote communities. Can you help? And so the initial project that I was tasked to do was to complete and compile design requirement documents for landfill transfer stations. I'll talk a little bit about those in more detail in a sec. And then during a presentation about those documents that I gave at a workshop in Thompson in 2019, in February of 2019, the pros were approached about the potential to backhaul material from St. Teresa Point First Nation, and this resulted in Kimlee Wong from Green Action Center. She was one of the original Pathfinders, and myself traveling to St. Teresa Point First Nation in March of 2019, and we did a little bit of training. There's a photograph here of we did some training on how to pack electronics. We also looked at packing lead acid batteries, and we talked about how to pack tires. And ultimately, that's what happened. Was we got a load of tires out on the 2019 winter road, and that was the first load of material that came out on Backhaul. I'd also like to acknowledge, though, that there's a number of communities that have already been working on end-of-life vehicles, and this photograph is taken from St. Teresa Point in March of 2019, and they had just loaded, or were in the process of loading, crushed vehicles onto a flatbed to get those out. So the communities weren't just sitting around waiting for Backhaul to come along. They had already been working quite hard up to that point in time. As we sort of built on this in the summer of 2019, I was invited by 5 communities: St. Teresa Point, Wasagamak, Garden Hill, Bunabonabee, and God's Lake, to visit them and assess where they were at in terms of the potential for Backhaul. And so at that point in time, I field tested the on-site assessment tool. Again, I'll talk about that in more detail in a minute. And we encouraged the communities to stage material and get ready for Backhaul that winter. And that was kind of the launch of Backhaul back in the summer of 2019. So the design requirement documents are very briefly, they're pretty complicated, but essentially there are 9 stewardship programs, information split into 12 key areas, and we define things like what kind of material is accepted in that program, what requirements for regulatory purposes are there, storage space requirements, equipment and supplies, training, and what kind of budgets you might need if you're going to start collecting any given material. And that was all compiled and put together into the design requirement document, often referred to as the blue binder. And it has also been included in the toolkit that the Green Action Centers put together. So the on-site assessment tool is something that the pros put together, and it's to be completed during an on-site assessment. And what we do with it is we measure community support for recycling. We look at the infrastructure and equipment that is existing in the community at that point in time. We look at storage, we look at training, policies and procedures, and then what kind of inventory is actually sitting there. So what is in the community that might come out in the next winter road season. Key components are, if possible, when I complete an on-site assessment, I always try to meet with chief and council, explain why I'm in their community, and explain how we're trying to support their waste diversion. The key, really, really important part is one-on-one conversation with the operator or operators. And then we identify gaps between the design requirements and what status quo conditions are exactly existing. And that allows us to set priorities. And so at the end, I produce a short report that I send to the communities, and it identifies any gaps in training, any areas that are really, it's really readily apparent after completing this work where the gaps are. But we also need to have a way to navigate those gaps, identify missing pieces, and then look for continuous improvement in key areas like budget, infrastructure, supplies, training, policies, procedures, those kinds of things. And I've highlighted training gaps and priorities because that is where safety first came from. As I toured through the communities and was able to work with the folks in the communities, what became readily and really apparent was that there was gaps in training that the folks had, and in particular, there was gaps in hazard awareness. So what sorts of hazards are existing when you're trying to divert material from landfill disposal, and how can we overcome those gaps by making people aware of what's going on? And this is really important because nearly 5,000 young workers in particular are injured every year in Manitoba, and the statistics for serious injuries are pretty alarming. Almost a quarter of young workers get almost no training or information about hazards when they start a job, and up to a third of young workers would not refuse to do work that they considered unsafe. So this really, from what I was seeing with my own eyes and the statistics that are available from Safe Work Manitoba, is that when young folks were being invited to come and work on waste diversion in First Nation communities, they were potentially putting themselves at risk. So what Safety First is it's aimed at 4R or recycling workers, especially new hires. And the purpose is to provide basic hazard awareness. And it's intended to complement and reinforce existing training that's provided to 4R workers by other organizations that are out there. And our main message is just to be safe every day in everything you do. Really briefly, what we look at with the Safety First training is source of hazards, physical hazards, chemical hazards, biological hazards, all of which exist when you are doing waste diversion. And then we look at understanding and having knowledge about safety labels, personal protective equipment, safety equipment, emergency plans, and communicating safety. So with that in mind, I'll show you primarily with a bunch of photographs what backhaul actually looks like. So we've been operating for 5 years now. In total, we've taken 37 semi-loads from 7 different communities. The products that we've removed include used oil, including the oil filters and containers, lead acid batteries, household hazardous waste, scrap tires, electronics, household recycling, including plastic, tin, and aluminum, and then non-stewardship materials, including cardboard, scrap metal, appliances, other metal scrap, and tire rims. Just again, a reminder where these communities are. There's a cluster over here on the east side of Manitoba, which includes St. Teresa Point, Garden Hill, Wasagamak, Bunabonabee Cree Nation, and God's Lake First Nations. And then up in the northwest corner, we've never been able to get any material out of Sease Dene First Nation up to this point in time, but we have been working with them, and we've gotten loads out of Barren Lands and Northlands Dene Siouxline First Nations. So Backhaul supports communities as they collect, pack, store, stage material, and then transport material for removal. So I'm just going to move through with mostly a series of photographs to show you what the folks in the communities do and how Backhaul supports them. So collection in the communities is a whole bunch of stuff. Some of it is as simple as a cardboard box collecting pop cans and plastic drink containers in an office. These bags here were brought to one of our contacts, just a community member who felt that it wasn't appropriate for them to send this stuff to landfill sites, so they collected it in bags and delivered it. These are collection bins that were built to keep animals, bears or dogs in the communities from getting into recycling and garbage. And then there's lots of opportunities within the landfill facilities in the communities to collect things like, in this particular case, compressed gas cylinders, propane containers, and that sort of thing. Again, sometimes the collection is not particularly neat and tidy, but all of this material gets collected up and we work with the folks in the communities to properly manage and handle this stuff. Reminder again that end-of-life vehicles are a really large problem throughout all of the remote First Nation communities. And as the community folks are going through and depolluting automobiles before they crush them, they're going to generate tires, including rims, lead wheel weights, batteries, oil, antifreeze, gasoline, mercury switches. And we try to work with the communities to backhaul all of those components that come out of an automobile being depolluted. Sorting and packing is a key component, and almost all of the material that's collected, this is household recycling, shown in most of these here. This super sack here has got oil containers in it, but it's really important to acknowledge and emphasize that all of the material that's collected in the communities is collected mostly by hand. There's not a ton of equipment like we might have in the South, a garbage truck or a recycling vehicle. Most of the folks are either relying on a pickup truck or a trailer, or folks delivering the material to their recycling locations, where they hand sort it. Bunabonabee Cree Nation, which is located in Oxford House, have got a full recycling building and for storage and handling, and they've got a baler in place, and they collect cardboard, aluminum, tin, plastic, and they bale it in this machine, and this is their storage area here, and you can see significant amounts of material being collected. Last year, we had 3 semi-loads in total of household recycling and cardboard come out of Oxford House. Used oil is another one that I talked about. Some communities collect used oil, and it's packaged up in 45-gallon drums, 205-liter drums, and shipped out on the winter road trucks. In other communities, they have used oil burners. So this used oil burner here is in Oxford House, and it is used in part to help heat their recycling building. So the material that they collect there helps keep their building warm. But they still have to collect it. They still have to package it up into drums and manage that material. Scrap metal, and in particular scrap appliances, is a really big problem and challenge in the northern communities. And one of the things I wanted to emphasize with this series of photographs here is this is a picture I took in the summertime, obviously, of appliances stored. This is the same pile just before the winter road opened up the following winter. And so, this looks pretty accessible and pretty easy to deal with, but this is what the folks in this community had to deal with in terms of digging stuff out of snowbanks before they could get it loaded onto trucks. Just some photographs of other material that's being collected. This photograph here is aerosol containers that were collected. Here's one of the drums open. Oil filters that come off of do-it-yourself oil changers and end-of-life vehicles. These are a bunch of empty 5-gallon pails, 20-liter pails that were generated during the COVID lockdowns, and there was a disinfectant that was used in the community, and there were hundreds of these pails that we were able to work with recyclers in the South to package these up and get out. And then tires, piles of scrap tires, and again, I'll show you some pictures in a second, but these tires all have to be dug out of this snow in order to get them onto a truck for backhaul. Just another illustration These photos here were taken obviously in the summertime. These are these same pallets in these three pictures here of those same pallets in the wintertime. And so again, one of the challenges that the folks have in the communities is managing snow and just digging stuff out in order to get it accessible to remove it on the winter road. And in fact, these I took these pictures last February in Lac Brochet, and they couldn't get that stuff dug out of those snowbanks, and so we're hoping we'll be able to get this material out this coming winter road. Just another example. This is from Bonabonabee Cree Nation, and these are pallets of batteries that are buried in snowbanks. Again, all this stuff has to be dug out in order to get it onto a truck. It also illustrates the lack of infrastructure that's in the communities in terms of indoor storage, so that they don't have to deal with snow. And yet, just another example. These are obviously summertime pictures from Lac Brochet, and these are photos that I took at the top here of those same appliances in the wintertime. So loading, what my main role with Backhaul is kind of logistics and assisting from that perspective. And so the folks in the communities, every fall at about this time of year, they send me inventories of what they have collected over the summertime and what they think that they can get out on the upcoming winter road. And based on that, I provide them with what we call a load plan. So it's really simple. It's just a scale drawing of a semi trailer, and it gives the folks in the communities an idea about what goes on the truck first. So typically the truckers want to have heavy stuff over the wheels. So drums of used oil and lead acid batteries are really heavy, and they'll go on first. And then we'll follow up with maybe appliances. I'll show you a picture or two in a minute about using tires to stop stuff from bouncing around on the roads. And then the light stuff goes at the lighter stuff, like empty oil pails in this particular case, go at the back of the truck. We also have to be cognizant, in many cases, the trucks have more than one stop when they come to Winnipeg, when they arrive in Winnipeg. And so we have to be cognizant of the stuff at the back of the truck is going to get unloaded first. And so we have to make sure that scheduling accounts for the fact that the oil pails are going to come off first, followed by appliances, followed by the lead acid batteries, followed by the used oil. And so the scheduling has to account for that, so that we're not taking stuff off and putting it back on repeatedly as material is delivered in the south. So that's another big chunk of the work that I do. So what does loading look like? It's cold, it's wintertime, and it's a lot of heavy physical labor. There's not a lot of equipment that the folks in the communities have. And so you can see here them loading, in this case, some appliances using a skid steer to take it to the back of the truck, and then they've got to push those appliances down to the back of the truck. We try to pack the appliances too high, so that means having to have physical labor to lift appliances on top of one another. This is also where load plans come in, and their importance. A dryer is lighter than a stove. And so when you're loading, I advise the folks in the communities to put the stoves on first, and then they can more easily lift a dryer on top of a stove, as opposed to the other way around. Because again, going back to the safety first stuff, we want to make sure that they're taking care to do all this work safely. In the wintertime, it gets dark early, and lots of times folks are working in the dark. Again, infrastructure and equipment is a limiting factor. You can see here in this picture, this is the team loading appliances onto a truck, and this is in Lac Brochet last February, and when I looked at the weather in Lac Brochet when they were loading this, it was -28 plus wind chill, and they were working at about 6 o'clock at night in this picture. So the hard dedicated folks, hardworking dedicated folks get lots and lots of kudos from me. You can see this is a partly loaded truck, and you see where appliances have been put on top of one another. So all that heavy lifting. And then in this picture here, you can see where they've used tires to shove them in between things so that they don't bounce around on the roads and jar things loose. This is especially important when we're talking about, say, 205-liter drums of used oil, because if they bounce around in a truck and the oil drum is compromised, then we've got a mess on our hands. So tires really come in handy to stick into all the little nooks and crannies to keep things from bouncing about. This is the crew in Oxford House loading cardboard onto a flatbed trailer, and we got 2 loads of cardboard like this. I believe there was, if memory serves me correctly, there was 75 bundles of cardboard, and each bundle of cardboard is about a half a ton, about 500 kilos. So somewhere around 35 or 36 tons of cardboard were loaded up and removed last year. Again, lots of physical labor. You can see these fellows here. They're having to physically put these tires into the back of the truck, and so again, lots of physical labor. You can see here where the tires have been stacked up, and this is all done manually. There's a really good example of a well-packed truck where everything is stuffed in there nice and tight. Not much is going to bounce around in that particular vehicle, and you can see the various types of materials: tires, hot water tanks, and appliances. Some pictures of these are lead acid battery pallets. These are household hazardous waste, probably aerosol drums. And then there's oil drums way back in this particular pallet. And these ones are electronics. So all stuffed in, all the heavy stuff, as I said before, go to the back of the truck to keep the heavy stuff over the wheels. One of the other things that I do is help out with regulatory stuff. When you're hauling used oil, lead acid batteries, household hazardous waste, it falls under the Manitoba hazardous waste rules, and so I help with documentation, with making sure that everything's labeled properly, filling out manifests, providing placards for the trucks. All that kind of stuff is one of the key things that I assist with, and I'll help prepare these documents and then put them on a courier into the community, so that the folks up there can use that material, this information, to properly and safely pack the trucks. Just to thought I'd show you some pictures of what the loads look like when they reach Winnipeg. This is at one of the facilities that we use as a cross dock in Winnipeg, and here the picture on the right is loose recycling. So there'll be aluminum cans, plastic bottles, those sorts of things in these bags. Here's the cardboard that came out of Oxford House. Pallets of lead acid batteries, oil pails, again, lead acid batteries in this picture, and oil drums up at the top of that picture. So in summary, What Backhaul is aimed at is diverting recyclable material from landfill sites. We try to support community priorities. And most importantly, we work with frontline people to support safe and effective removal of recyclable material from First Nation communities. And with that, I am done. I'd be happy to answer any questions if anybody had any.
Thanks for the presentation, Randy, and your work. And again, kudos for the First Nations communities doing all the heavy lifting. So if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat or the Q&A. I think the chat should be able to, you should be able to access the chat at this moment now, I believe.
Yes, I am looking at it.
Folks are saying amazing work. Maybe we'll wait and see if anybody else comes up with a question. I guess for me, Randy, a question that I have is how early do you start prepping for the next backhaul season once one is over? Like, is there any rest time, or do you just get to work right away?
From my perspective, there's a decent gap. It depends on if I have opportunity to travel to the communities in the spring and summer to work with the folks on the ground. If that's the case, then I can have a very busy summer and spring and summer. Things really start ramping up for me about this time of year. But remember, for the folks in the communities, their job never stops.
Right.
Garbage. This is an important takeaway everybody needs to understand when you're working in this industry. Garbage and recycling never stops. It's generated by each of us every day, and somebody needs to handle it and manage it, whether it's burying it in the landfill site or diverting it and packaging it up for backhaul. Their job never ends.
Right. We've got a couple questions that came in, Randy, while you were answering my question. Victoria was wondering, do most of the collaborations are communities from up north? How about the southern communities?
For sure. So my focus is on stewarded materials and working with the producer responsibility organizations. So in the South, each of the pros will work individually with communities. The only place that we're collaborating and sort of consolidating all of our efforts is in winter road access communities, because there's no other choice. You can, for example, the electronics producers EPRA can arrange to come and get 3 pallets of electronics from any all-weather road community, no matter where in Manitoba, at any time of the year, and they're willing to do that. Whereas it makes absolutely no sense for EPRA to send a truck for 3 pallets to St. Teresa Point. And so collaboration of all of the pros together is just focused on the winter road communities only. So that's kind of the defining factor of backhaul, is it's only winter road access.
Right. Thanks, Randy. The next question, somebody's wondering, Shea Asensio is wondering, education related, are there programs for students at any level to learn small and big actions we can all take to help support the work you do?
The Green Action Center for sure I know is done really good work with schools. SEER, Center for Indigenous Environmental Resources, has done work with schools that I'm aware of. There's likely other organizations that are doing that. I do not have the capacity for that kind of stuff at this point in time, anyways.
For sure. Yeah. And I guess for the individual that asked this question, the webinar is recorded. So if the students are at a level where they can rewatch the webinar, we'll be uploading it to our YouTube channel. And yeah, that could be a way to teach some students about the work being done up north. Christy is wondering, they said the metric of 37 backhauls over 5 years sounds good. But I'm wondering about if there are any comparable stats. Example, how much was landfilled, was incinerated, or a comparable stat in other backhauls?
Yeah, for sure. Great question. The harsh reality is 37 loads is a drop in the bucket. And the vast majority of material that is generated in these communities is going to landfill. There's not a ton of burning going on that I'm aware of. Most communities have stopped burning. They've recognized that it's just not healthy to do that as a way of reducing garbage. But yeah, absolutely. 37 loads is a drop in the bucket. There's a ton of work to do. We're scratching the surface. The other thing I'll note is, to my knowledge, and I'm totally open to being corrected if I'm wrong, nobody else in Canada is doing what we're doing here in Manitoba. This is unique. So there is no other metric to compare to what other provinces are up to, because this just isn't happening anywhere else.
Thanks, Randy. We have another question. It says, what would you say about prevention? Are you focused on preventing, for example, as I understand, cars become a graveyard for many uncertifiable cars are driven up there?
My focus, and maybe I'll just back up and kind of the Backhaul project is me and my computer and my cell phone and my kitchen table. It is not a big organization. We've got a really small budget, and our focus is to support communities as best as we can to get stewarded material out on winter roads. So there's, again, a ton of work that needs to be done that spills outside of that really narrow parameter that within which I work. So yeah, there's not a ton of work that I'm aware of is being done in those areas. The other thing I will add, though, is many of the communities that we're working with, you saw it in the photographs. These folks, the photograph that you're looking at right now, that's their infrastructure. They're working on the ground. We have to be able to meet people where they are, and not try to impose Southern expectations for meeting the requirements of the 4 Rs when we're struggling to just get rid of legacy material, and again, just scratching the surface. So Backhaul's only 5 years old. We're just getting going on what needs to be done as the ultimate goal of zero waste sometime in the future.
Thanks, Randy. I don't see any other questions at the moment, but I think we still have a little bit more time if there's anybody else that would like to ask a question. We've got some pretty good questions so far. And I guess to maybe emphasize too to the attendees that might not be super familiar with the winter roads, it's like you were saying, Randy, it's a lot of work, and it's a lot of work that needs to happen in a short amount of time. And that everything.
Yeah, that's another really good point the shortest road season in these 5 years has been 4 weeks. The longest one has been 10 weeks. And there's no way that I can predict today on the beginning of November what the weather's going to be like in February, when the road's going to open, how long it's going to be open. The other limiting factor I'll point out is I can only work with truckers who are willing to hang around in a community long enough to allow these folks to put their recyclables on. There's a real limiting factor in terms of trucks, the availability of trucks.
Any last questions from anyone else? If not, I would like to thank you again, Randy, for the presentation, for the work that you're doing and are gearing up to now. I'm sure that you're, like you said, you're very busy. So thanks for taking the time to do this presentation. And for the attendees, we'll be having another RISE webinar on February 14th. So feel free to follow our social media pages for more information about that webinar. I'll be putting the links to our social media as well as our newsletter sign up in the chat. So feel free to check that out.
Okay, thanks, everybody. If anybody has other follow-up questions, you could feel free to reach out to me through Green Action Center. I collaborate with the Pathfinders regularly. Remember that word, collaboration. Backhaul is if nothing else, collaboration, and it's really important that we all work together on these things. So you can reach out to me through Green Action Center if you wish.
Okay, well, thanks again. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll be, staying in touch for the next webinar.